Konnichiwa. Watashi no namae wa Lisa. In Japanese, that means hello, my name is Lisa. There are often times wherein we come to a country, a place, or we indulge in a thing, and we may not understand a language, a culture. And when that happens, we are forced to rely upon third persons to interpret things for us. And that is the case of Shohei Ohtani. Shohei Ohtani is a Major League Baseball player, once played for the Angels, now plays for the Dodgers under a $700 million contract. He has recently been in the news among a multiple of things, to include but not be limited to the subject of an initial investigation that started by ESPN. You see, ESPN had got word that there was $4.5 million bank wires to bookmakers coming from Ohtani's bank accounts. But Ohtani alleged that he had no idea what was transpiring. So as a result, the day that story was to break, his lawyers released a statement stating they were not abreast of these transactions and that Shohei had been the result of or a victim of fraud. Okay? We call him ShoTime because he was a phenom, and he is a phenom. Batting .333 with 3 home runs and 8 RBIs. He's got an excellent record in the league, well-deserving, and at 29 years of age is one of the highest paid baseball players in MLB history. Understand? But that came with the price. And the price is a $16 million price tag that looms over his head as a result of alleged gambling. He hired a gentleman by the name of Missouri. Some people pronounce it Mizuhara, but it's Mizuhara. So depending upon your knowledge of the Japanese language and phonics, we're going to call him IM, because I'm very careful about individuals who are merely subject to indictments, and it is not my job to adjudge them guilty or innocent. So this show is particularly for the purposes of information and educational only, and not to allow for anyone to be directly or indirectly influenced about this person's culpability or liability. But he is under an investigation and a recent indictment by the United States Central District Office in California because he alleged and served as a quote-unquote de facto manager. And according to E. Martin Estrada, the leading U.S. attorney prosecuting this case, I am engaged in embezzlement to the tune of $16 million from ShoTime's bank account. It includes, but is not limited to, transactions that transpired from November 2021 through January 2024. It includes 19,000 bets, averaging $25 per day, up to about 160,000, 25 bets per day, averaging $10 to 160,000. So on average, do the math, it's about 12.8 thousand bets per day. But guess what? ShoTime won $142 million, but he lost $182 million, leaving him with a $41 million debt. By March 2024, ESPN somehow got involved. This is why I tell you, be mindful how you work with us in the journal field, because people talk. And somebody was talking, and somebody leaked, ratted, dropped dime, snitched. I mean, whatever words we come up with, ESPN got word by March that there was $4.5 million being paid in bookmaking to a company that was already the subject of a federal investigation. Did they know that at the time when they were learning that ShoTime allegedly was involved in bookmaking? I don't know. What we do know is that the organization that was being paid the $4.5 million was already the subject of a federal investigation, FBI, U.S. Department of Justice. Okay? So as a result of that, they were going to go public with the information they found out. As what most journalists do is we do attempt to reach out to persons to see if they want to give a statement or have a comment with regard to or respect to the information for which you're going to report. In that circumstance, the lawyers were able to come forward and state, while we are now made aware of this, we are privy of it through your investigation. We want it to be known that our client, ShoTime, is the subject, the victim of fraud. Well, how did this fraud come about? Like so many professional athletes of all ethnicities, race, and backgrounds throughout all of the major team sports, hockey, basketball, football, baseball, and individual sports, many come from backgrounds where they lack knowledge in the field of business and finance and or culture and language. We see that a lot with Major League Baseball players, many whom do not speak English fluently, are not apprised or abreast, if you will, of the English language. As a result of their failure to learn the English language or allow themselves to be engulfed in the language and the business side of our culture, many of them rely on other people to whom they believe are trustworthy. We see that a lot with the players coming from the Dominican Republic, Spanish speaking. That has come up in many conversations regarding Azusa, who with the Braves. We love A, but we also recognize he doesn't know the English language fluently. He relies a lot on third and second persons to interpret things for him, to include but not be limited to contracting and business. So when ShoTime's quote unquote de facto manager presented him with a contract, took him to a bank in Arizona. Why Arizona? The Dodgers practice facility training is in Arizona. But when he also began to take him to other banks in California as well, he served as not only the interpreter, but de facto manager, an individual whom would be given authority equivalent to what we call powers of attorney, that would allow them to act in the stead or the place, if you will, of that particular athlete, ShoTime. And such that would allow for him to have full access to monies that go in and out of bank accounts. Again, we see that with a lot of athletes. And I'm going to be discussing that as it pertains to athletes in the NBA and another episode as well. But as it pertains to this particular case, for this MLB player, ShoTime, $16 million has now been alleged as embezzled. So there are many questions that come up during the course of investigations to include but not be limited to the following. Did ShoTime know or have reason to know that a bank account had been opened? Did ShoTime know or have reason to know that when he presented himself with IM to open a bank account, that he had a duty to know what that bank account would be utilized for? Did ShoTime know or have reason to know what monies would be going in and out of that bank account, meaning what type of transactions would be made from that bank account? Did ShoTime know or have reason to know that at some point between the periods of 2021 and 2024, to the tune of about $12,800 per day, 25 transactions were going through this account and being paid to bookmakers? Did ShoTime know or have reason to know that $142 million had gone through that account as earnings, and later $182 million in losses, with the negative balance being due bookmakers of $41 million? did ShoTime at any point, directly or indirectly, benefit financially from any of these transactions? According to the United States Department of Justice, they went through bank accounts and phone records, and in the course of going through these, they have decided that he had no knowledge of any of these transactions, that he was not directly nor indirectly associated with any of these transactions. It is a 36-page indictment against IM. That includes, but is not limited to, the allegations of felony bank fraud, wire fraud. Here's the question. In all the meetings that ShoTime was having with IM, was there any conversations that ever came up with respect to or regarding betting? On the outside looking in, one may ask, why would you allow IM to open a bank account for you? And what was the sole purpose or your understanding for opening this bank account? Under what circumstances would your general manager need to open a silent bank account? A silent bank account may be an account that no one other than you and that person knows exists. Sometimes those accounts are open overseas. Sometimes they're open as what we refer to as offshore banking, like Turks and Caicos, right? Where there's a protection for taxes, or there's a protection from your spouse. We do know that he's married to a former Japanese basketball player, Mamiko Tanaka. So when IM advised you that he was opening this bank account, where did he get the initial bank deposit to put into that account? And what, if any, was ShoTime's understanding of the bank account? While we do recognize that IM served as an interpreter, we also recognize that IM speaks Japanese fluently. He is of Japanese descent. And so one may state there could not have been a misunderstanding between them communicating with each other with regard and respect to the bank account and why it was being opened. You see, if this was an American who said, I'm going to interpret in Japanese for you a transaction that's being made by Americans, one might suggest there would be room for confusion and misunderstanding. But wherein these are two persons of both Japanese descent, both speaking the same native tongue, where would the miscommunication come from? So while there's a lot of information out here about, well, that was his interpreter, the question is, what did he misinterpret with respect to why this bank account was open initially? Because if ShoTime understood that this account was being opened with the intent to be a silent bank account, then it was open with the intent. And I want to be respectful and I want to be mindful and I want to also legally protect my show with the next statement. But why are you opening a bank account with your IM that's supposed to be a silent account? I'm sure DOJ looked into this, but forgive my investigative background because I'm still trying to figure out that part. If I have $20 million and I put it in an account and I don't want no one else to know this account exists, I'm already attempting to engage in some type of dishonesty, fraud, or hidden assets with the intent to defraud somebody. So what was ShoTime's understanding of this particular account? Or was ShoTime, in fact, engaged in betting? And that's what that account was used for. But that he was not aware that his interpreter, IM, de facto manager, would eventually use that account to engage in bookmaking with a company that would also be the subject of a federal investigation. Are you following me? This is one of the problems why sports betting is a major issue now. It is something I recently posted in response to Jontay Porter's situation in the NBA, wherein Commissioner David Stern, is now Silver. He was once the deputy for David Stearns. I keep forgetting Silver. That's your place now, and it's been your place now. Forgive me. But wherein Commissioner Silver, Adam Silver, has now wanted to ban Jontay from the NBA altogether. Jontay plays for the Toronto Raptors. My position then and remains now, don't ban him. Ban sports betting. When you have sports gambling, you compromise the integrity of the profession. You compromise the integrity of the game. Rex Chapman has a book that talks about some of these issues of drugs, alcoholism, and I added to this comment that I made regarding Rex Chapman's book. He's a former player with the NBA, and one of the reviews, if you will, that I write, that he also retweeted, by the way, and it's now almost like 150,000, views on it, but is that the very vices that have plagued professional sports, alcoholism, drug addiction, gambling, is the very thing now that they've allowed to be the gateway. By opening this door to companies that are now promoting gambling, you poison, you muddy the waters. You compromise the integrity of the game. So much so that even players that are making millions of dollars find themselves betting against the game. Ultimately, as Commissioner Silver refers to it, the cardinal sin of betting maybe even against themselves. But how do you prevent that in an environment that is conducive to the corruptible seed of drugs, alcohol, and gambling? That problem existed 30, 40 years ago when the likes, respectfully, of Michael Jordan was playing, allegations regarding Jose Canseco, Charles Barkley, if I stand to be corrected, Reggie Jackson, and a host of other players in these four areas: drugs, alcoholism, gambling, and or steroids. They have put a dark cloud over sports. And what this highlights regarding ShoTime is even wherein this young man at 29 years of age, his birthday is July 5th, is making or under the contract of $700 million. Look at how much money he won, purportedly, $142 million, just in a period of a year and a half, 2 years, against a multi-year $700 million deal that's going to be taxed. So if one can open a bank account and laundry money through that bank account, which is what IM is accused of doing, and then embezzle that money from the person to whom you opened the account for to the tune of $16 million, that's problematic. Not just for ShoTime, but it becomes problematic for the sport as a whole. Because I can tell you, if this was happening in baseball for somebody at $700 million, imagine what the players who aren't making anything close to him are doing. And imagine about the other sports that aren't being compensated like baseball players. It's a different topic, but let me throw this in here. When you look at how baseball has changed from 1955 to now, we have 1955 numbers as it pertains to minority representation. 6.2% of Major League Baseball players identify as African American. The numbers are worse now than they were in the 1950s, during the time when Jackie Robinson was playing. We look at the salaries of the players that come from the Dominican Republic. They're not paid as much as the Asian and the white players. So when you hear stories like this about sports gambling, the possibilities of financial benefits and gains, if you will, hidden bank accounts, how far-reaching is it? And will I am become the scapegoat for a bigger issue and problem in professional sports? And this is the same thing I wrote about a few days ago as it pertains to Commissioner Adam Silver's attempt to go after Jonte. And one of the reasons why I point that out is because, and why I brought up David Stearns, not simply because I forgot that we have Commissioner Adam Silver's, was because of the three things I quoted in that piece that I wrote about, and I posted it online. Commissioner David Stern was known for being stern. He protected, prioritized, and then punished. Protected, prioritized, and then punished. But there's another P word in there. He policed the NBA. Wherein you fail to police Major League Baseball, NFL, hockey, and the NBA from issues pertaining to something like this, gambling, you're going to have this problem. Under the watch of that commissioner, you wouldn't have had sports betting. So therefore, you wouldn't have had the issues relating to a Dante. You know, Jonte Porter wouldn't have been able to be a part of or be accused of violating or engaging in a cardinal sin. The same is true of Major League Baseball. There are times when you do have to go and cut it at the root. We know that gambling is an addiction. We know that the majority of the people who gamble don't win. We know that many of them are betting against the odds of winning. We know that those who eventually will win often lose more than they won. We know that it impacts family and communities. We know that gambling also results in and includes, but is not limited to, prostitution and alcoholism and drug addictions. We know that the environment that's conducive for gambling often takes these gamblers outside of their home and their communities, and it compromises the profession. We know that of the 32 states within the United States that authorizes it, we know that the billions of dollars that come in, they don't profit the communities in which they claim they serve. We even see that with lottery. These K through 12 programs don't benefit. The communities that are most adversely impacted by gambling are the minority communities. So when we make a person think that you can turn $1 into $50, we know that's not going to happen. And while we are focusing on the mere issue of embezzlement and how this sports gambling crime has turned and impacted one individual to the tune of $16 million, we have to focus on the number of families and persons impacted by gambling every day. You can turn on any sporting event now in the United States, from Major League Baseball to basketball, football, hockey, even tennis matches. From tennis matches. And you can see on television, on streaming, on the apps, all these commercials to gamble, to drink, to go to casinos. All the vices that once were policed by professional sports. Wherein you have sports betting, you have corruption. Wherein you have sports betting, you have corruption. And we've seen it in baseball. We have seen it in basketball. Everyone wants to be a winner. And when you're not careful, the way you police a system, everyone also has a price. What is the price of sports gambling, where players will eventually throw the game? We have a lot of athletes over the years who've lost out because they were involved in betting against themselves and the team. And you say to them, that's the cardinal sin. But for so many of them, Corruption breeds corruption. And there are many individuals who are forced to do things they would not have otherwise done. Corruption breeds corruption. And when the stakes are against a lot of people, the people you least likely assume will be involved and or engaged fall prey. And when you take many young men and women and you put them in collegiate or professional sports, even high school, and people begin betting against them, they eventually will bet against themselves. And when someone can take you to the bank and open a bank account and make a deposit, you can no longer state that your inability to understand the language becomes the barrier, the excuse, the justification for the existence of the bank account to start with. And even in reading and understanding an indictment, a formal complaint, allegations written by my colleagues as well, I'm still trying to connect the pieces. But I do understand that the U.S. Attorney, Central District, E. Martin Estrada is no joke. If he pursues you, he knows he has what he needs to pursue you. And if he clears you, he's either clearing you for immunity to testify, or he's clearing you because there's enough evidence where an indictment against you won't survive. They say put up or shut up or tee up. Put up, shut up, or tee up. Put up the evidence that you have, shut up and dismiss it if you don't, or tee up, go to trial. We'll see. But at 19,000 bets, 25 per day, averaging $10 to $160,000, to the tune of $12,800 per day on average. And he loses $41 million. At what point, but for the ESPN investigation, would ShoTime know or have reason to know that this took place in a bank account that's under his name over a period of 2 years? That's the power of media. But what did ESPN really know? And what did ESPN not report as it pertains to the allegations? And who dropped dime? That's a source. Yeah, we understand. We get it. Thank you. It is good to know that, like many of us, as we're doing with basketball, that ESPN got word and decided to conduct their investigation as it pertains to Major League. But it's much bigger than Major League. Basketball, hockey, football. It is the corruptible seed of sports gambling at a time where you never thought or imagined that that would be one of the things that finances sports in America now. Because everyone wants their own app. They want their own media rights. They don't want to pay a dime anymore to anybody. And so part of the collective bargaining agreement is a percentage of media and Merck to the players. But at what expense? We know that ShoTime had partnerships with New Balance, Fanatic, Topps, Hugo Boss, Porsche, Mitsubishi, and money is not really an object for him. But for those who engage in sports betting, money is an object. And many of them are trying to increase their odds. They play against the odds. And it has adversely impacted and compromised professional sports. And under the Hoover administration for baseball many, many decades ago, I think the same is going to happen and come true now. Eventually, sports betting is going to eventually be regulated and then abolished or repealed because it's a corruptible seed that is adversely impacting the profession. And the fans are going to eventually come up and speak too because you can't trust the game anymore. I say the same is true when I think about the injury reports that I have to report on. Why is it a secret that a player is going to play? He's either injured and is out or he's going to play. And wherein the Sixers were fined $100,000 by Commissioner Silver for failing to state that on April 2nd, that Joe Ebert would be returning to the game. Why was that a secret? And that's the power of Vegas. And that's the power of sports betting. And that's the power of a silent bank account too. Thank you for joining me on Field to Rim, brought to you by Seltzer and Sports. Follow us on Twitter at Seltzer Sports and or Lisa Hampton _. Again, Seltzer Sports or Lisa Hampton _.